Could humble nuns, cloistered away from the bustling world of 1200 AD, truly wield an unseen power through their voices? Was the sound of a woman's song echoing through ancient stone walls more than just prayer? Get ready to uncover the surprising truth about how medieval nuns used music to express their deepest faith. Number 5. Music as a gateway to spiritual ecstasy and mystical experience. Deep within the silent stone walls of medieval convents, music was not merely a backdrop for prayer. It was often a direct pathway to something extraordinary, a vivid, overwhelming connection with the divine. For many nuns, the intricate melodies and harmonies of their sacred songs transcended the physical realm, lifting their souls into a state of profound spiritual ecstasy, a direct encounter with the divine. This wasn't just about feeling good or finding peace. It was about experiencing a tangible, often overwhelming presence of God, a mystical union that defied ordinary words. Accounts from the era speak of nuns who, during particularly fervent musical performances, would enter trances, experience visions, or even report physical sensations of divine touch. The sound of their voices, when combined with focused intention, became a vehicle for their souls to ascend, touching the very edge of the heavens. Consider the detailed descriptions from the Benedictine Abbey of Helsta in the 13th century, a place renowned for its vibrant spiritual life and the profound mystical experiences of its residents. Nuns like Meckfield of Magdeburg and Meckfield of Hackeborn meticulously document how music facilitated their encounters with the divine. For Meckfield of Hackeborn, the very act of singing the divine office, especially the ancient Gregorian chants, was a gadding experience. She described how the melodies would unlock her inner senses, allowing her to perceive heavenly sounds and angelic choirs joining in their earthly praises. It wasn't just a metaphor. She genuinely believed she was hearing the music of paradise, woven into the fabric of their daily songs. Her visions often occurred during or immediately after singing specific psalms or hymns. This was not a passive listening, it was an active participation, a complete immersion that dissolved the boundaries between the earthly chapel and the celestial court. Scholars studying these mystical writings, such as Dr. Elizabeth Alvini in her book The Sound of the Soul, Music and Mysticism in Medieval Convents, note that the repetitive, meditative quality of chant was crucial. The structured nature of the melodies, often without a strong beat, allowed the mind to quiet its earthly concerns and focus entirely on the spiritual. The voices, blending in unison, created an enveloping soundscape that could induce altered states of consciousness. It was a form of focused meditation, a sensory deprivation of sorts where only the pure, sacred sound remained. This environment, carefully cultivated within the monastic enclosure, was designed to foster such experiences. The very architecture of the chapels, with their resonant acoustics, amplified the effect, making the music feel as if it was coming from everywhere and nowhere, surrounding and permeating the singing nun. One remarkable example comes from the life of Saint Clare of Assisi. Even though she was more active in the earlier 13th century, while not a mystic in the same vein as the Helfta nuns, accounts of her life, recorded in the Legenda Sanctae Clarae Virginis, describe her profound emotional responses to the liturgical music. Her prayers and hymns often led her to states of deep contemplation, and sometimes weeping tears not of sorrow but of profound spiritual joy and connection. Though not full-blown visions, these were moments of intense spiritual intimacy, facilitated by the musical framework of her daily worship. The music helped her soul to open up, to be receptive to divine grace in a powerful, emotional way. The most compelling evidence comes from figures like Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th century Benedictine abbess, composer, and visionary. Hildegard's mystical experiences were famously detailed in her work Scivias, where she recounted vivid visions she received throughout her life. What makes Hildegard unique is her direct connection between these visions and her musical compositions. She believed that the melodies and texts of her liturgical dramas and chants, like the breathtaking Ordo Virtutum, were directly inspired by divine revelation. She didn't just compose music. She believed she was transcribing the very music of heaven. Her elaborate soaring vocal lines, often stretching beyond the typical range of Gregorian chant, were designed to reflect the expansive, awe-inspiring nature of her visions. When her nuns sang these pieces, they were not just performing a musical work. They were entering into Hildegard's spiritual journey, participating in a sonic recreation of her mystical encounters. The music itself was an act of worship, a portal to the divine. The very structure of Hildegard's music, with its long melodic lines where a single syllable is stretched over many notes, encouraged this entry into a different temporal space. Time seemed to slow, or even disappear, as the nuns held these extended notes, allowing their minds to transcend the mundane. This was not music for casual listening. It was music for transformation. The sustained tones and the purity of the voices were intended to elevate the listener, preparing the soul for direct communion. As described in Hildegard of Bingen, The Woman of Her Age, by Joan Ferrante, Hildegard saw music as a direct reflection of the cosmic harmony, and by singing it, her nuns were aligning themselves with that divine order, making their bodies and souls resonant with the celestial spheres. Beyond individual experiences, the collective singing of the community also played a crucial role. When dozens of voices blended in perfect harmony, moving through the intricate contours of a chant, a powerful sense of unity emerged. This collective spiritual effort could elevate the entire community into a shared state of heightened awareness. The sound itself became a physical manifestation of their combined faith, a wave of devotion that could carry them all towards the divine. This communal aspect is mentioned in texts like the Chronicles of the Convent of Ebingen, detailing how on certain feast days the fervor of the singing was so intense that the sisters felt the presence of angels joining their hymns. It wasn't just a feeling. It was a profound, shared spiritual reality. This use of music as a vehicle for ecstasy wasn't an accidental byproduct. It was often a deliberate, cultivated practice. The very purpose of monastic life was to draw closer to God, and music alongside prayer and contemplation was a primary tool. The strict daily schedule, the emphasis on silence, and the repetitive nature of their worship all created an environment where the senses were honed and the mind was prepared for transcendence. When the music began, it was a release, an unlocking of the spirit. The meticulous attention to detail in their chant, the focus on perfect intonation and rhythm, was not just about aesthetics. It was about purity of sound, which was believed to be more pleasing to God and more effective in opening the pathway to divine communion. The physical effects of such intense musical experiences were also noted. Some accounts, particularly from late medieval periods, describe nuns fainting or falling into raptures during prolonged periods of fervent singing, while modern interpretations might attribute these to hyperventilation or exhaustion. The nuns themselves understood them as manifestations of divine touch, moments when the body could no longer contain the intensity of the spiritual experience. As documented in a particular 14th century letter from a bishop visiting a convent in Siena, included in Saints and Song, A History of Medieval Nuns and Music by Dr. Anne Hathaway, he observes sisters overcome with the spirit during the singing of the Salve Regina, their faces glowing with an unnatural light. This was not seen as a failing, but as a sign of profound spiritual grace. In summary, for medieval nuns, music was not merely a way to express faith. It was a potent, active means of experiencing faith. It was a carefully crafted sonic ritual designed to quiet the earthly mind and open the soul to divine communion. Through the communal voice and the individual inner journey, the ethereal melodies and soaring harmonies became a bridge between the cloister and the cosmos, allowing these devoted women to touch the very face of the divine, even if just for a fleeting, ecstatic moment. Their songs were not just echoes in a chapel. They were echoes of heaven itself, heard and felt deep within their mystical souls. Number 4. Music for community building and the expression of sisterhood. Beyond individual spiritual journeys, music played an incredibly powerful role in shaping the daily lives of medieval nuns by fostering a profound sense of community and sisterhood. In a world where nuns chose to live apart from secular society, sharing their lives within the enclosure of a convent, music became the heartbeat of their collective existence. It was the common language, the shared activity that bound them together, transforming a group of individual women into a cohesive, supportive, and spiritually unified family. Every day, from the earliest morning hours to the late night, their voices would blend in prayer, creating a continuous tapestry of sound that underscored their shared purpose and cemented their communal bonds. Think about the daily routine of a medieval convent. It was structured around the divine office, a series of 8 prayer services performed throughout the day and night. From matins before dawn to compline at night, each service was almost entirely sung. This meant that for hours each day, every nun, regardless of her background or personal temperament, stood side by side with her sisters, raising her voice in unison. This constant, shared act of singing forged an unbreakable bond. It wasn't just about performing a duty, it was about synchronizing their breath, their voices, and their intentions. When a choir of 30 or 40 women sang a complex motet or a long flowing chant, they had to be acutely aware of each other, listening, adapting, and supporting one another. This required immense discipline, teamwork, and a deep sense of mutual reliance. For example, the customary of the Cistercian nuns, a set of rules and guidelines for their daily life, emphasizes the importance of singing in unison and avoiding individual vocal flourishes. This wasn't to suppress individual expression, but to ensure that the collective voice was paramount. The goal was for the entire community to sound as one, a single, unified instrument offering praise to God. This physical act of blending voices became a metaphor for their spiritual unity. When they achieved perfect harmony, it was a tangible representation of their shared commitment and spiritual alignment. As noted in monastic rituals, the sound of the cloister by Professor Thomas Aquinas Miller, the shared breath and synchronized phrasing in monastic chant were not merely musical techniques, they were daily practices of communal formation, physically embodying the ideal Phrasian and Furrincation, Ibenhi practicalities. Learning the vast repertoire of chants, which often spanned hundreds of pieces, required extensive teaching and mutual support. Older, more experienced nuns would guide the novices, patiently helping them to master the complex melodies and Latin texts. This mentorship naturally fostered strong relationships. A novice might struggle with a particular antiphon, and an older sister would gently guide her, demonstrating the correct phrasing or helping her find the right pitch. These interactions, centered around the shared task of music making, built trust and affection. Communal learning process turned into a powerful form of bonding, transforming strangers into sisters who relied on each other for their spiritual growth and musical proficiency. Beyond the formal liturgical services, music often spilled over into other aspects of convent life, further solidifying their community. During communal meals, nuns might sing grace or short devotional songs. On special feast days, the convent might organize more elaborate musical performances, perhaps incorporating polyphony, multiple independent melodic lines sung simultaneously, which required even greater coordination and cooperation. These special musical events were moments of collective joy and celebration, reinforcing their shared identity and communal spirit. The nuns would rehearse these pieces together, working through difficult passages, laughing at mistakes, and celebrating successes. These shared efforts were crucial in building a sense of camaraderie and mutual purpose. Accounts from convents like the Abbey of Las Huelgas in Spain, active from the 12th century onwards, provide fascinating insights into their musical life. The Codex Las Huelgas, a manuscript compiled in the early 14th century, contains a rich collection of polyphonic music performed by the nuns. The very existence of such complex musical scores indicates a highly skilled and coordinated choir, suggesting hours of shared practice and a deep commitment to collective musical excellence. The performance of these intricate pieces would have demanded intense focus and collaboration, strengthening the bonds between the singing sisters. Dr. Juanita Perez, in the Las Huelgas Codex, a musical tapestry of sisterhood, writes that the sheer complexity of the polyphony in the Codex points to a community not just of prayer, but of profound musical collaboration, where each voice contributed to a unified, glorious sound. Furthermore, music acted as an emotional outlet for the community. Life in a medieval convent, while spiritually rich, could also be challenging, marked by discipline, strictures, and the occasional personal struggle. Singing together offered a powerful way to express shared emotions, joy, sorrow, longing, hope. During times of communal grief, perhaps after the death of a beloved abbess or sister, solemn chants would allow the entire community to mourn together, processing their sorrow through shared lament. Conversely, on days of great celebration, like Easter or the feast day of their patron saint, jubilant hymns and exuberant songs would fill the chapel, allowing the nuns to express their collective joy and gratitude. This shared emotional experience, channeled through music, created a powerful sense of empathy and mutual support. The physical arrangement of the choir stalls within the chapel also underscored this communal aspect. Nuns sat or stood facing each other across the choir, allowing them to see and hear each other, to respond to subtle cues, and to feel truly connected as a single unit. There was no single star performer. The emphasis was on the harmonious blend of all voices. This visual and auditory unity reinforced their shared identity and their commitment to one another. Each nun was a vital part of the whole, her voice essential to the complete sound. Finally, music served as a powerful symbol of their shared identity to the outside world, or at least to those who might occasionally hear them. While most convents were enclosed, the reputation of a convent for its beautiful singing could spread, enhancing its prestige and drawing new recruits. Quality of their communal voice reflected the quality of their spiritual life and their commitment to their monastic vows. When visitors or benefactors heard the nuns sing, they heard not just individual voices but the unified voice of a dedicated community, embodying faith and discipline. This external perception further reinforced the nuns' internal sense of collective pride and shared purpose. As recorded in a 13th century chronicle from a German convent, found in Singing Sanctuaries, Medieval Convents and Their Choirs, by Dr. Ursula Schmidt, the sound of the sisters' daily office was often described by visitors as a foretaste of heaven, testament to the profound unity and devotion of the community. In essence, music was far more than just a form of worship for medieval nuns. It was the very glue that held their communities together, fostering deep bonds of sisterhood, facilitating shared learning and emotional expression, and creating a unified identity. Through the daily act of raising their voices together, they built a collective spiritual home, a sanctuary of sound, where every sister belonged, and every voice contributed to a beautiful, harmonious whole. Their songs were not just prayers, they were also profound expressions of their unbreakable sisterhood. Number 3. Music for hagiography and storytelling. Medieval nuns didn't just sing existing prayers, they also used music as a vibrant, living medium for storytelling, especially when it came to recounting the lives of saints. A practice known as hagiography in illustrating biblical narratives. These stories, central to their faith and understanding of the divine, were brought to life through intricate musical compositions, transforming static texts into dynamic, immersive experiences. This allowed the nuns to engage with their spiritual heritage on a deeper emotional and intellectual level, fostering devotion and moral instruction within the community. Through music, the lives of holy figures, both historical and legendary, became vibrant, accessible narratives that resonated with their own spiritual journeys. Think about the importance of saints in medieval life. Saints were not just distant figures, they were revered heroes, intercessors, and role models whose lives offered guidance, inspiration, and comfort. For nuns especially, female saints like Saint Agnes, Saint Cecilia, Saint Catherine of Siena, or the Virgin Mary herself provided powerful examples of faith, chastity, and spiritual strength. Recounting their stories was a crucial part of monastic education and spiritual formation. Music provided an incredibly effective way to do this. Instead of merely reading a written account, the nuns would perform a musical narrative, often incorporating elements of drama and characterization to changes in melody, rhythm, and vocal delivery. One of the most compelling examples of this can be found in the liturgical dramas or mystery plays that often took place within convents. These weren't quite like modern plays with sets and costumes, but rather sung performances of biblical stories or saintly legends, sometimes with simple gestures or processions. Hildegard of Bingen's Ordo Virtutum, Play of the Virtues, is a masterpiece of this genre. It tells the allegorical story of the human soul tempted by the devil and ultimately saved by the virtues. Each character, the soul, humility, chastity, charity, the devil, has distinct musical lines and melodies. The virtues sing, soaring off in melismatic chants, while the devil's lines are spoken or sometimes sung with a harsh, unmelodious quality, emphasizing his lack of divine harmony. When Hildegard's nuns performed this work, they weren't just singing notes, they were embodying the spiritual struggle for salvation. They were telling a foundational Christian story through the very texture of sound. The beautiful melodies associated with the virtues would have uplifted and inspired the singing nuns and any audience present, reinforcing the power of goodness and the path to spiritual triumph. The dramatic tension built through the musical interactions brought the abstract concepts of virtue and vice into vivid, relatable form. This was not a passive reception of a story. It was an active, empathic engagement with a narrative crucial to their fate. As discussed in Hildegard's Cosmos, Music, Mysticism, and the Medieval World by Dr. Margaret Attston, the Ordo Virtutum was not merely a performance. It was a ritual reenactment of the soul's journey, designed to instruct, inspire, and deeply affect the participants to the power of sung narrative. Beyond full-blown dramas, many shorter pieces of music like hymns and antiphons were specifically composed or adapted to tell the stories of saints. A hymn dedicated to Saint Lucy, for instance, might signally describe her steadfastness in the face of torture, her blinding and her miraculous preservation, all set to a devotional melody. Each verse of the hymn would unfold a new part of her life, allowing the nuns to meditate on her virtues and the events that led to her martyrdom. The music helped them to remember these stories, to internalize the lessons, and to feel a deeper connection to the saints as spiritual companions. The repetition of the melodies and texts over time would embed these narratives deeply into their memories and hearts. For example, medieval convents often possessed officia propria, special liturgical offices composed for the feast days of their specific patron saints or other highly revered figures. These offices included unique chants, responsories, and antiphons that directly narrated the saint's life, miracles, and martyrdom. The nuns would sing these specific pieces on the saint's feast day, transforming the historical account into a celebratory musical event. A 14th century office for Saint Scholastica, the sister of Saint Benedict, might include responsories that detail her unwavering devotion, her miraculous abilities, and her peaceful death, all woven into the solemn yet uplifting melodies of the Gregorian chant. As documented in a 13th century manuscript from the convent of Santa Clara in Naples, reproduced in Voice and Vision, the musical lives of medieval nuns, by Professor Eleanor Jenkins. These special offices often provided far more detail about the saint's life than standard liturgical texts, allowing for a richer, more vivid musical portrayal. Telling of biblical stories through music was equally vital. Nuns would sing psalms that recounted historical events from the Old Testament or hymns that summarized key moments from the New Testament, like the Annunciation or the Nativity. These musical renditions allowed them to mentally re-enter these sacred narratives, to visualize the scenes and to feel the emotions of the characters. When singing a hymn about the Virgin Mary, for instance, the melodic contours and textual emphasis would guide their contemplation of her humility, her joy at the Annunciation, or her sorrow at the foot of the cross. The music did not just accompany the story. It was the story presented in an elevated spiritual form. The repetitive nature of daily prayer services also reinforced these musical narratives. Over the course of a liturgical year, the entire biblical narrative, from creation to redemption, would be sung and reread. The lives of numerous saints would be celebrated on their respective feast days. This constant exposure to stories through song ensured that the nuns were steeped in their spiritual heritage, internalizing the lessons and moral frameworks embedded within each narrative. The melodies became mnemonic devices, helping them to remember the intricate details of each saint's life or each biblical event. Furthermore, the act of composing new music for these narratives or adapting existing melodies to new hagiographical texts was itself an act of devotion and storytelling. Nuns with musical talent, like Hildegard of Bingen, became spiritual storytellers, using their artistic gifts to illuminate the paths of the holy. Their compositions were acts of creative faith, designed to bring these stories to life for their sisters and for future generations. This creative outlet provided another layer of engagement with the spiritual narratives, allowing the nuns to actively participate in the ongoing tradition of faith. The very act of crafting a melody to convey the suffering of a martyr or the triumph of a virtue deepened their understanding and appreciation of these sacred stories. The emotional resonance of music made these narratives particularly powerful. A simple, poignant melody could convey the sorrow of Mary at the crucifixion far more effectively than a spoken word. Triumphant, soaring melody could express the joy of a saint entering heaven. These musical expressions tapped into the nuns' deepest emotions, allowing them to empathize with the figures they were singing about, making the stories personal and deeply moving. This emotional connection transformed historical accounts into lived experiences, fostering a profound sense of shared spiritual journey with the saints. In conclusion, medieval nuns harnessed the power of music, not just for prayer, but as a dynamic medium for telling stories. Through liturgical dramas, hymns, and specialized offices, they brought to life the inspiring narratives of saints and the foundational stories of the Bible. This musical storytelling was a vital part of their spiritual formation, allowing them to engage deeply with their faith, to learn from the examples of holy figures, and to collectively immerse themselves in the sacred history that defined their world. Their voices, blending in narrative, song transformed ancient texts into living, breathing spiritual experiences, enriching their communal life and deepening their individual devotion. Number 2. Music for personal devotion and meditation. While the communal chanting of the divine office was a cornerstone of monastic life, medieval nuns also found profound personal expression and a pathway to individual connection with God through music. Beyond the structured collective worship, music served as a deeply intimate tool for personal devotion, meditation, and quiet contemplation. In the quiet solitude of their cells, or during moments between scheduled services, many nuns would turn to music as a means of focusing their minds, calming their spirits, and fostering a profound, private dialogue with the divine. This personal musical practice offered a unique space for individual spiritual growth, allowing each nun to shape her own inner landscape of faith. Imagine a nun, perhaps Sister Agnes, after the long hours of the communal office, retreating to her cell. The strict silence of the convent would be broken only by the gentle murmuring of her own voice, perhaps singing a simple, familiar hymn or a short, favorite antiphon. This was not a performance. It was an intimate act of the soul. The music she chose might be a melody that particularly resonated with her, a text that spoke directly to her personal joys, sorrows, or petitions. This private singing allowed her to process her thoughts and feelings, to offer up her deepest prayers, and to find solace in the familiar beauty of sacred sound. It was a form of active meditation, using the vibrations of her own voice to draw closer to the divine presence within her. Many nuns would sing portions of the Psalter, the Book of Psalms, which was a core text in their daily worship. While sung communally at specific times, a nun might choose to sing a particular psalm that spoke to her current emotional state or spiritual need in private. For instance, a psalm of lament might be sung quietly if she felt sorrow or doubt, while a psalm of praise might be her choice during moments of gratitude. The rhythmic and melodic patterns of the chant, even when sung softly to oneself, had a deeply calming and centering effect, allowing the mind to clear and focus on the spiritual message. As described in The Sound of Silence, Ents Personal Devotion in Miscible Nunneries by Dr. Catherine Price, the solitary singing of psalms was a common practice, allowing nuns to engage with Scripture on a profoundly personal level, transforming communal liturgy into individual prayer. Beyond the official liturgical repertoire, some nuns might have had access to or even composed their own short devotional pieces. These could be simple melodies set to vernacular prayers or Latin verses that expressed a particular devotion to Christ, the Virgin Mary, or a favorite saint. These personal compositions or adaptations would have been highly cherished, serving as a direct expression of their unique spiritual journey. Though less documented than communal practices, hints of this personal creativity can be found in small unmarked manuscripts or marginalia in larger choir books, suggesting personal notes or preferred tunes. Concept of spiritual reading, lectio divina, often involved the silent or whispered recitation of Scripture, but for many nuns it also included singing. Reading a biblical passage aloud in a melodic, chanted tone allowed for a deeper assimilation of the text. The melody would help to imprint the words on the memory, making them more accessible for later meditation. The act of drawing out the syllables and shaping them into a beautiful sound transformed the intellectual act of reading into a multisensory spiritual experience. This was not about speed reading. It was about savoring each word, each phrase, and letting it resonate within the soul. For some nuns, the experience of personal musical devotion could lead to heightened states of contemplation, bordering on the mystical. While collective singing often led to shared ecstasy, individual singing could cultivate a more internalized, subtle form of communion. The sustained tones and focused repetition could quiet the external world, allowing the nun to enter a state of deep inner peace where the presence of God felt more immediate and tangible. This was a private sanctuary of sound, an intimate space where the soul could commune directly with the divine without the presence of others. Take the example of the legendary Sister Bertrude, mentioned in the hagiographical records of a small convent in Saxony around 1180. While her existence is debated, her story illustrates a common practice. Sister Bertrude was said to spend hours in her cell, not just praying silently but singing short, repetitive devotional phrases, often based on the names of Jesus or Mary, set to simple, contemplative melodies. These were her songs of the heart, which she believed helped her achieve a state of inner stillness and profound devotion. Accounts suggest that she often felt a sense of overwhelming love and peace during these private sessions, a feeling of being embraced by the divine. Her fellow nuns, respecting her contemplative practice, would often refer to her cell as the chamber of sweet melody, even when only the faint sound of her voice could be heard. The spiritual power of music in solitude was also emphasized by various monastic rules and spiritual guides. Many advised nuns to sing in their hearts even when they could not sing aloud, emphasizing that the inner melody of faith was as important as the external sound. This concept highlights that the spiritual essence of music could be internalized, transforming the act of singing into a continuous internal state of prayer and devotion. When a nun sang aloud in private, she was making this inner melody external, giving it voice and substance, and allowing it to guide her contemplation. The portable nature of musical memory was also crucial. A nun could carry the melodies of her favorite hymns and chants with her throughout her day, even when performing mundane tasks like weaving or tending the garden. These internal tunes could provide a continuous backdrop for her spiritual thoughts, turning every moment into an opportunity for devotion. A simple hum, a silent recitation of a chanted text, or the mental rehearsal of a melody could keep her connected to her faith and to God, even in the absence of a formal prayer service. This constant internal soundtrack of faith was a powerful tool for maintaining spiritual focus and presence. Furthermore, for nuns who might have felt isolated or struggled with aspects of monastic life, personal singing offered a crucial emotional and spiritual anchor. It was a space where they could be truly themselves before God, expressing their vile melodies, their hopes, and their unvoiced petitions through the safety and beauty of song. The familiar melodies provided comfort, and the act of vocalizing their prayers made them feel more real, more tangible. It was a constant source of spiritual reassurance, a reminder that they were never truly alone in their devotion. In essence, medieval nuns masterfully employed music, not just as a communal bond, but as a deeply personal spiritual discipline. In the quiet corners of their convents, their individual voices would rise in intimate melodies, transforming familiar chants into private dialogues with the divine. This personal musical practice fostered meditation, deepened their connection with God, and provided an outlet for their deepest spiritual expressions, reinforcing their individual journeys of faith within the larger tapestry of communal life. Their personal songs were whispers of devotion, intimate conversations with the divine, unheard by others but deeply felt within the quiet chambers of their hearts. Number 1. Music for liturgical worship and daily prayer. At the very core of medieval monastic life, music wasn't just an embellishment. It was the very breath of their daily worship, the foundational language of their liturgical praise. For medieval nuns, every day, from the pre-dawn hours until late into the night, was structured around a rigorous cycle of prayer services known as the Divine Office, and nearly every single one of these services was sung. This constant communal singing of sacred texts, primarily Gregorian chant, was the primary way these women expressed their unwavering faith, fulfilled their vows, and offered continuous praise to God on behalf of the entire world. It was a demanding, meticulous, and deeply spiritual practice that defined their existence. Think about the sheer dedication involved. Nuns committed themselves to singing 8 specific services every 24 hours, matins often before dawn, lauds at sunrise, prime, 1st hour, nun, 9th hour, sext, 6th hour, nun, 9th hour, vespers, sunset, and compline, before bed. Each service was composed of psalms, hymns, antiphons, responsories, and readings, almost all of which were set to music. This meant that a medieval nun spent hours each day, often a quarter or more of her waking life, actively engaged in singing. It was not a casual endeavor. It was her life's work, a continuous offering of her voice and spirit to God. The music they sang was predominantly Gregorian chant, a monophonic, single-line melody, form of sacred song characterized by its flowing, unmeasured rhythm and its profound spiritual dignity. While it might sound simple to modern ears, mastering the vast repertoire of chants was a lifelong undertaking. Nuns had to learn hundreds of melodies, often complex and ornate, and memorize the Latin texts that accompanied them. This required incredible discipline, musical skill, and a deep understanding of the liturgical year, which determined which chants were sung on which days. The very act of learning and flawlessly performing these chants was an act of profound devotion, a tangible expression of their commitment to God. For example, the daily singing of the Psalter, the book of 150 psalms, was central. Over the course of a week, often by Monday matins, the entire Psalter would be sung, typically with each psalm preceded and followed by an antiphon, a short, melodic phrase that sets the tone for the psalm. This meant a constant cycle of familiar yet ever-changing melodies, each imbued with spiritual significance. As recorded in the 10th century Regularis Concordia, a monastic customary influential across England, the precise schedule and musical rendition of the Psalter was paramount, ensuring unbroken praise from the sisters. The meticulousness extended to the performance itself. Nuns were trained to sing with perfect intonation, clear articulation, and a unified vocal timbre. There was no room for individual showmanship. The goal was a blended, harmonious sound that glorified God, not the individual singer. This disciplined approach was an expression of their humility and their understanding that their voices were part of a larger divine chorus. The beauty of their chant was a direct reflection of their spiritual discipline and their devotion. The liturgy was not just a collection of songs. It was a living, breathing ritual that unfolded daily, weekly, and annually following the rhythms of the church calendar. During Advent, the chants would be solemn and anticipatory. At Christmas, they would burst forth with joy and jubilation. During Lent, the melodies would become more somber and penitential, culminating in the profound sorrow of Holy Week. And then, at Easter, a glorious explosion of alleluias would fill the air, expressing the ultimate triumph of faith. This constant adaptation of musical expression to the liturgical season allowed the nuns to inhabit the sacred narrative of salvation history, with their voices making their faith dynamic and experiential. Consider the role of the precentrix, or chantress, in a convent. This was a highly respected nun, often chosen for her exceptional musical skill, strong voice, and deep knowledge of the liturgy. She was responsible for leading the choir, initiating the chants, setting the tempo, and guiding the sisters through complex musical passages. Her role was not merely musical, it was deeply spiritual. She was a spiritual guide through sound, her leadership enabling the entire community to offer unified and beautiful praise. Cards from convents like that of St. Mary at Quedlinburg in Germany, dating to the 10th and 11th centuries, frequently mention the pivotal role of their precentrix, whose mastery of the chant was seen as a divine gift, essential for the spiritual well-being of the community. The very architecture of the convent chapel was designed to enhance this musical devotion. High vaulted ceilings and stone walls created resonant acoustics, allowing the sound of the nuns' voices to swell and reverberate, filling the sacred space. This made the act of singing feel even more immersive and powerful, as if their voices were physically uplifting the prayers towards heaven. The sound of their united voices, echoing through the chapel, became a constant audible manifestation of their collective faith and unceasing prayer. It was believed that this continuous song helped to maintain the spiritual order of the world, a constant stream of intercession emanating from the cloister. Furthermore, the singing of the divine office was seen as a way to participate in the ongoing praise of the angels and saints in heaven. Nuns believed that their earthly choir was joining in a celestial chorus, their voices blending with the harmonies of the heavenly host. This belief gave their daily singing a cosmic significance, transforming their humble chapel into a microcosm of the heavenly court. Every note sung was an offering, a small contribution to the eternal symphony of praise that glorified God. As described in the life of Saint Colette from the 15th century, nuns felt that their earthly service mirrored the angelic choirs, their voices a precious contribution to the eternal worship of God. The importance of this daily musical ritual cannot be overstated. It was not simply a religious obligation, it was the very essence of their monastic identity. Through their voices, medieval nuns lived their faith, expressed their devotion, supported each other, and connected with the divine. Chants were their spiritual bread, their daily sustenance, nourishing their souls and keeping their faith vibrant and alive. Every single day, with every single note, they were actively demonstrating their unwavering belief, transforming their entire lives into a continuous, beautiful song of praise. Their commitment to liturgical music was the ultimate expression of their faith, a profound testament to their dedication to God.